Penguin Random House Audio presents The Sommelier's Atlas of Taste, a field guide to the great wines of Europe, by Rajat Parr and Jordan Mackay. Read for you by P.J. Ochlan. Introduction. Blind tasting isn't just a parlor game or a trial meant to torture sommeliers on the path to certification. When practiced by friends around a table with a few good bottles, it can be a wonderful focusing tool that pushes us to think more deeply, or, to use a trendy term, be mindful of what's in the glass. It concentrates discussion, tasks the memory, and draws us ever more fully into relationship with the wine in front of us, and wine in the larger sense. Rajat, for those of you who don't know about him, is one of the most gifted blind tasters in the world, possibly ever. No one I've encountered tastes annually the colossal global range of wines every year that Raj does. And when he tastes, he apparently does so with what I've coined an enographic memory, a truly rare kind of mind. Not only does he remember practically all the wines he's ever tasted, the flavors, contours, textures, acid and tannin levels, but he also seems able to recall salient, even trivial details about them. Their oak regime, vintage conditions, fermentation vessel, etc. It's a remarkable gift, and a vexing one when you're blind tasting with him, your own copious flailing guesses standing out glaringly against his steady stream of perfect calls. But Raj also nurtures his talent with a schedule of tasting and traveling few other people have probably ever undertaken. His life is analogous to the kind of regimen you'd expect an elite runner to follow while training for the Olympics. However, instead of marathons at high elevations, substitute weeks-long treks through the vineyards of France. Instead of sprinting on a track, imagine vertical tastings of multiple vintages of one wine. Instead of hours of stretching, substitute daily walks through vineyards with winemakers, picking up rocks, talking about soil structure, wind patterns, and sun exposure. And in lieu of a diet rigorously monitored by nutritionists and coaches, think of tasting all these wines with the cuisines of their regions, whether at a Michelin 3-star restaurant or at the kitchen table at a winemaker's home. If wine tasting were an Olympic sport, Raj would be standing alongside the likes of Michael Phelps and Usain Bolt at the closing ceremonies. As it is, it's probably not a bad idea for him to don some sweats and hit that running track too. Raj's training, however, comes not from any competitive drive, but from the most heartfelt love of wine and wine culture. When he tastes something that captures his imagination, especially if it's a wine from one of the world's few remaining regions relatively unknown to him, his eyes widen, his attention focuses, and he becomes fixated on knowing its metrics. He'll grab the person who poured it for him by the arm and demand, "Who made this? Where did they work before? What soil is this from? What's the farming like?" Then, you can bet, within the year, he'll arrange a visit to this region, to the very winery that produced the wine. It's a pilgrimage and a compulsion. The investigations and explorations catalyzed by a single taste of wine, the kind that provokes transatlantic and transcontinental travel, requires finding weeks of time in one's schedule, and costs thousands of dollars in travel, lodging, and meals, are the basis for the second reason for creating this book. This second reason isn't just about blind tasting, but tasting in general. And drinking, and talking. Sommeliers and sommelier culture were the subjects of our first book. At the time, Raj was one of them. I was not, but I hung out with them, and we spent much time in a cadre of wine lovers, eating, tasting, and talking about how wine tastes. But now, Raj is no longer a sommelier. He co-owns a few wine brands and spends a lot of time thinking about wine production, which is where his mind was always heading. The natural question after, "How does this wine taste?" becomes, "Why does it taste like that?" Why is the most vexing question in all of wine. Most attempts to explain precisely why a wine tastes the way it does are doomed to fail. But, unlike the great philosophical questions involving life, God, and the universe, with wine you actually can talk to the maker. Like the rest of us, the vigneron, a French term indicating the person who grows the grapes and makes the wine, our preference over English's winemaker, though we will use both throughout this text, may not be able to explain why the wine tastes the way it does, but obviously she can at least offer some detail and perspective. So this book takes its direction from the way Raj constructs his life, essentially a non-scientific, yet rigorous and impassioned road-tripping inquiry into how wine tastes and why. I've spent much of the last 18 years of my life doing similar work as a wine and food writer, though certainly not with the same intensity. No one comes close to Raj in that. So it made sense to do this together and record it in book form. The most important phrase in the previous paragraph may be non-scientific. Raj and I are both very interested in wine science and look forward to a day when that science might explain some of the phenomena we experience with our senses. But we are not scientists and have only a tenuous understanding of the chemistry, biology, and physical sciences that apply to wine. Nevertheless, in our wine discussions, we are often tempted to fall down that rabbit hole, explaining and invoking things with poorly understood or pseudo-scientific concepts. That said, we are also aware that wine science still has a long way to go, and that the reality of wine's complexity will elude the reach of science's explanatory powers for a long time. Case in point, the controversial word minerality. Scientists don't like it because it suggests a certain taste or texture is produced by minerals floating around in the wine, minerals that their testing can't find. Non-academics use the term because it powerfully invokes either a taste or smell memory of mineral or rocky substances, or the textural sensation of mineral-rich water. In that unscientific sense, we use it as a metaphor and an adjective, not as an actual physical property in a wine. Yet science still hasn't explained what causes that mineral sense. So our approach is to be essentially old-fashioned. That is, we get our wisdom from the vignerons who produce the wine. If they tell us a certain type of soil in their region usually produces wine of a certain character, we are going to take their word for it, and if finding it useful for learning to taste the region's wines, report what they have to say. If we use the word minerality, it's as a metaphor, not a physical state of being. If we talk about terroir, it will be with a consideration of cultural practices as well as what we know of soil, climate, etc. We'll discuss this all more thoroughly in Chapter 1, where we look at concepts like terroir, about which our perspectives widened immensely over the course of our travels. Now, a few words on the title. Traditionally, an atlas is a collection of maps. Listening through this volume, you will quickly see it's not a traditional atlas. Once again, we're employing some poetic license and using the word metaphorically, for what we're generally depicting are not roadways or topographies or constellations, the classic subjects of atlases, but the taste of wine. And how do you render a map of taste? You do it in the same confounding way people have always been doing it, with words. Especially when it comes to wine, language is personal and imprecise. But it's all we've got at this point, reminding us of the famous line from music criticism, "Writing about music is like dancing about architecture." Now about the other big word in our title, taste. Taste has many definitions, and in this book we invoke many, if not all of them. Yes, we are writing about the taste of wine. Yes, we are also chronicling a series of journeys dedicated to the act of tasting wine and food. Sometimes we had only a taste, though on other occasions we drank the whole bottle. Furthermore, and this is important, the subjects chosen here were curated in accordance with our sense of taste. Some of you might think we have bad taste, and some of the wines we
Sample complete. Ready to continue?